Well, be thankful, folks. There's no such thing as rain delays in basketball. We had a bit of a minor delay here as we had some problems getting back on. Chris had a phone overheating problem like normal. Problem solved, though. Phone out of case, so we'll get that. We apologize, folks, for that 36-minute delay we were just in to sort of get a few things straightened out here. But welcome back, folks, to the LA Sparks 365 Network, and welcome in to the 2014 WNBA Playoff Preview Show. We had 12 teams to start the year. Only the best 8 qualify for the postseason, 4 from each side of the story. We will preview and break down all the series, and we will name our 2014 WNBA champions at the end of the show. Of course, alongside Chris Mancy at the NR Studios up in Anaheim, California. Cal McClurg back in one piece from Hawaii, back in Studio 171 here in San Diego. Chris, I mean, if it's not one thing, it's another with delays here. Whether it's, restroom breaks one thing, man, but phone problems, man, I've been like our death sentence here. 36 minutes to get that phone problem fixed, man. Other than that, how's it been going up there?
Nothing much, just holding my keys in my hand.
Yeah, that's kind of like what happens when you take your phone out for the first time in forever and you kind of forgot how small it really is in person. But with that, folks, this 2014 WNBA season began with 12 teams vying for the WNBA title. We're down to the Elite 8. Only 8 teams remain that began this year. 4 from each side of the conferences, 4 from the East and 4 from the West make up the 18 field. All of those 8 teams are vying for the 2014 WNBA championship. Question being, where is the title going to wind up this year? Will it be in Hollywood in Los Angeles, the desert of Phoenix, back home in Minneapolis, San Antonio, Atlanta, Chicago, Indiana, or will Barack Obama have the WNBA champs at the White House this year in Washington, D.C.? We'll preview it all right now, folks. And, of course, we'll begin out east first before we get to the western side of the story here. Chris, the first series is one that looks like it could go one way here, Chris. You have the number 1 seed and the defending WNBA Eastern Conference champion, Atlanta Dream, hosting a number 4 seed Chicago Sky. The teams record for the 2014 season, Atlanta finishing 19-15. The Sky finishing in 4th at 15-19. Chris, to Atlanta, another year, Chris, where they get to the finals and just can't get the job done. There's some talk, about the team, being, one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference that just can't get it done when it counts the most. Chris, this year with Michael Cooper as their head coach, he's done a great job as he did back in 01 and 02 with the Sparks and when he came back in 08 and 09 and 2010. But Chris, in your mind, though, I mean, what's sort of been like Atlanta's death sentence for them not getting that championship the past 3 years in a row in the Eastern Conference?
I think they've been cursed or something, and they can't even win it. They just get to the finals and just pretty much just like in the MLB, just like the Texas Rangers get to the finals and choke.
I mean, it basically, Chris, can be defined as a choke because, I mean, Atlanta has sort of been the class of the Eastern Conference for the past 2-3 seasons. And, I mean, the core of talent there, Chris, is there. It's just a matter of, can they get hot at the right time? Now, they've been hot in every postseason series, Chris, but have gone ice cold when it counts the most for the WNBA championship. I think, Chris, with Michael Cooper coming in this year, there might be, Chris, this might be the year finally for Atlanta where they finally, Chris, can get through those 2 rounds. But finally, sort of with that old Lakers Showtime mentality of, getting to the finals, yes, but now it's a matter of, can you do it and can you finally win the title this year is the only thing.
Yep. Agreed.
And Chris, the Dream will not have their hands full here. This team they're playing, Chris, they aren't a bunch of slouches. They did look like it earlier in the year, Chris, but they're playing the 4th seed Chicago Sky, who had a very rough season. What started off, Chris, as a year that looked promising again, but then after that whitewashing by the Sparks in Rosemont, Illinois, Chris, everything went down south for Chicago, and Chris, quite literally, the sky did fall in Chicago. After that, Chris, again, Elena Del Don went out again to get treatment, Chris, for her Lyme disease, which, again, has sort of plagued her career for the past 2 seasons. And, Chris, it just seems like when Elena was not with Chicago, it was a walking wounded zombie, basically, that you basically could go up there and basically, wipe the floor clean with every night, Chris. But they rebounded nicely when Elena came back. And I mean, good for them though, Chris. But I mean, it's kind of like it's a tale of two seasons. I mean, here they go from being the best team in the WNBA last season to that first game sweep by the Fever. Where this year, Chris, it was sort of a bump and grind and sort of battle back for and face adversity this year to come back, knowing again they did not have Elena Del Don for 16 games this year.
Yep.
So, Chris, I will have to ask the question here. Again, looking at the records real quick here, 19-15 for Atlanta, number 1. Chicago, number 4, 15-19. Chris, who wins this first-round series and why?
Wait, is ED back?
Yes.
I think Chicago Sky, since she's back, I think the Sky will take Atlanta to 3 games. And I think Chicago will win.
I don't know if Chicago can pull it off, Chris. I mean, I know Indiana did last season, but I think Atlanta, Chris, I think they've sort of reloaded a bit with their talent that they sort of got this year. And I think with Michael Cooper, Chris, I mean, he has that mentality, and he's going to basically do whatever it takes to push the right buttons, Chris. I mean, I think this is Atlanta's conference to lose until someone beats them in the conference finals. I think it goes to 3, but I still see Atlanta getting past round 1, I think, because I think they're just a bit more. I think they're a bit better than Chicago. Because, Chris, I mean, one player can't win this game for Chicago. It's going to have to be Elena Del Don and Sylvia Fowles and the rest of the game, Chris. I mean, it can't just be one player. And, I mean, with Atlanta having Angel McCoughtry and Erica DeSouza and Shoni Schimmel, Chris, who I think is going to win Rookie of the Year, I think Atlanta's going to win the series, though, either way. The other Eastern Conference matchup is the 2-seed Indiana Fever facing the 3-seed Washington Mystics. And, Chris, both teams come in with identical records of 16-18, Chris, but the Fever with the overall tiebreaker over the Mystics get the 2-seed. Chris, Indiana, this is their 10th straight year in the WNBA postseason, highlighted by them finally winning the title 2 years ago over Minnesota in 2012. Chris, it was a year, I think, for Indiana that they're playing for a lot here. I mean, not only did Tamika Catchings miss 17 games this year, but this is the last year for head coach Lynn Dunn, who's going to retire after the year because of her age, and she's calling it a career after 40-plus years of coaching basketball. Chris, I think there's more of an added incentive, I think, for the Fever to play with for this postseason matchup because you're playing for your head coach in her last year before she retires. And, Chris, I think Indiana got hot right when Catch got back in the lineup. Your thoughts about Indiana's season, again, knowing, man, that this is the last time you'll see Lynn Dunn on the sidelines coaching, and also that they got their star player back pretty much at the right time of the season towards the playoffs.
I think, like you said, they're going to play a lot for their head coach and maybe going all out and maybe make it to the finals and maybe win it.
I'm Chris. I think there's a lot to play for. There's going to be heavy hearts, heavy emotions to play when Game 1 is played in Indianapolis, knowing that this could be Lynn Dunn's final home game, perhaps, as the head coach of the Indiana Fever. Now, Chris, to the Washington Mystics. With the 2013 WNBA Coach of the Year, Chris Underside, and Mike Tebow, and a lot of fresh faces between Monique Curry, Ivory Lotta, and, of course, Chris, the young hot shots from UConn, Stephanie Dolson and Bria Hartley. Chris, Washington, I think, is set up for the future. I think they're going to have I think their future is very bright with those young kids coming up along with Ivory and Monique Curry and Kia Vaughn and their veteran leadership. But, Chris, I mean, it's a matter of, can you rely equally on both your star players and your rookies coming in to carry the load? And, Chris, I think the Mystics are a bit too inexperienced, I think, to be Indiana, Chris, because the Fever does have Catch and a few aged veterans on that team. I think it will go to 3 as well, but I think the Fever come out on top because I think they come out on top, Chris, because of playoff experience. I think. What's your take on this series?
I think probably Indiana might win, might be a clean sweep over Washington.
Yeah, I give the Mystics one game at least, Chris, because I think I think they'll take game 2 at home, to be honest, and then they'll probably drop game 3. But I mean, it's kind of tough to kind of pick because both teams have the same record of 16-18. But I just think that Indiana has some more weapons and they have the veteran leadership and plus a very well-known head coach. out to the Western Conference playoff picture. 4 teams making it as well from the West. We're to the first matchup, of course, which pitched the 29-5 Phoenix Mercury against the 16-18 Los Angeles Sparks. Chris, to the Mercury, who I think, and I will say it here, who I do have winning the WNBA title this season. Chris, have reloaded this season. The long haul here again, re-signing Diana Taurasi to a long-term contract. Also today, re-signed Candice Dupree to a long-term contract. Chris, to be honest here, I mean, I'm not being a homer, Chris, I'm being realistic here, but the Mercury actually have given me nightmares because they have totally retooled their team this year. I mean, between getting Misty Bass, trading for Aaron Phillips from Indiana, and of course, Chris, you got the veteran Diana Taurasi in her 11th year, and Chris, I mean, you have a player in Brittany Griner who, really, Chris, nobody in this playoff series can put a body on to stop her down low in the post. She basically, Chris, has pretty much put LA through the cheese grater in those 5 games played in the regular season. And, Chris, above all, too, a 16-game winning streak and now the most wins in a regular season. But a dominating regular season most times equals a downfall in the postseason. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Sparks did win. But, Chris, I really don't know that. I can't see the Sparks somehow, in some fashion, winning 2 out of 3 against Phoenix. Can it happen? It can. I mean, we've seen stranger things in other sports, like the San Jose Sharks blowing a 3-0 series did against the Kings this year in the NHL. But, Chris, your thoughts, though, about the Mercury, man, I mean, they really do scare me. And I think, Chris, the other 7 teams in this playoff field also should be a bit nervous, too, because no one, Chris, really can match up with Griner. And I think the record, Chris, speaks volumes for how well they have dominated this season.
Yep, agree. But like I said, never say never. And I have the Sparks beating the Phoenix Mercury.
We'll see what happens. Highly doubt it, but got to have some sort of faith. And Chris, to the Sparks real quick, too. We do have to talk about them here as well because we're going through each team. Again, man, we already talked about it on the last show, but again, a very, very turbulent year for the Sparks, finishing 2 games below 500 and in the 4 seed. Chris, again, we already have talked about it, man. We know that it's a real uphill climb, and we have seen weird things go on in other sports, man. But your last thoughts, real quick about the Sparks 2014 season is what?
It was up and down roller coaster, and couldn't even hold on, going back and forth, but made the playoffs, and now everyone is at 0-0, and anything goes.
Yeah, so Chris, so obviously, folks, Chris make the homer pick, but I got to be the realistic guy here. I've got the Mercury beating the Sparks in the first round again. Then, Chris, the other matchup here, the 2 and 3 seed will feature the 25-9 Minnesota Lynx and the 16-18 San Antonio Stars. Now, Chris, the Lynx this season took a bit of a small little a little bit. Not a lot, just a little this season. A few injuries this season. Rebecca Brunson was out for an extended period of time. Simona Augustus has been battling bursitis in her knee for the past few games. She's been kind of hit and miss this season. They probably have the regular season and perhaps finals MVP and Maya Moore on their side, along with that great guard of Lindsay Whalen. But, Chris, sort of one of the kind of a cliffhanger this year, Chris, because a lot of injuries have happened with Minnesota. They really didn't fire on all cylinders like they have in the past years. I think they're still geared for the post, for a long run again. But one of these kind of has kind of thrown off, threw a bit of a wrench in my plans of putting Minnesota past Phoenix in the conference finals this year. But I mean, injuries happen, we know that, man. But 4 straight years now, Chris, the Lynx have won 25 or more games for 4 straight years. Your thoughts, though, about the Lynx kind of having one of those years this year, where they kind of took a bit of a small little nosedive, just a little bit. But more so, Chris, it was about their injuries and health this year than anything else.
Yeah, agree. But we'll see what happens in the playoffs.
I mean, Chris, Frankly, I don't know if the 3 or 4 seeds have a fighting shot in the Western Conference Finals. Being realistic here, as a homer, I would say LA has a chance, but being the realistic guy, I have to be in neutral here. They have no chance, and that includes the Stars, Chris, who will play the Lynx as the 3 seed, also finishing 16 and 18. Chris, I think the Stars are just like the Fever this year, Chris. Well, they have a lot to play for. Of course, this year being the final year, you'll see Becky Hammon play in the WNBA before she goes on to her new endeavor as the assistant coach of the San Antonio Spurs of the NBA, the first full-time female assistant coach hired. There's a lot to play for there for San Antonio, just like it is with Indiana, Chris. I mean, it probably ends Game 2 in San Antonio, perhaps maybe Game 3 in Minneapolis, but you know, Becky Hammon had a great career, but Stars had a good season this year. And, Chris, just like, you know, Washington, I think the Stars' future is also bright because, you know, Kayla McBride has been a quote-unquote shining star for them during the whole season. She's been very good at it in her first year out of Notre Dame, who you still despise to this date from the women's basketball tournament this season. And, quite frankly, I think the Stars, again, are going to be up there for a while, too, again, between Danielle Robinson and their play as well, but because it's kind of tough for me to picture the Mercury of the Lynx going down in the first round. But again, we go back to 0-0 here. But again, your thoughts about the Stars and their season, and again, your lasting thoughts too about Becky Hammon and her last season as well.
Going to be a great season, great career for Becky Hammon. She really missed in the WNBA, and just hope they play their heart out for her.
So, in case anyone's wondering, my projected finals and final matchup, I have Atlanta, Indiana, and Phoenix and Minnesota. And if anyone's wondering out there, I have the Dream and Mercury in the WNBA finals, and I have the Phoenix Mercury for the 3rd time in franchise history hoisting the 2014 WNBA championship. Chris, I know you didn't really plan it out like I did. As you can kind of tell, I kind of did like a cheat sheet here and basically, you know, wrote down everything and, you know, on pen and pad here. Your thoughts about your finals that you have set for East and West for the conference and then the WNBA finals, and in your view, who really, not saying LA, but who really will be hoisting the 2014 WNBA title this season?
I think Atlanta and Indiana in the East, and LA and Minnesota in the West, and then I have LA and Atlanta in the finals. Then I got LA taking it.
Good luck with that. I think a lot of people are laughing at you right now that are watching this right now about your playoff prediction. But again, well, like we said before, anything can happen. But again, if anyone's wondering, Chris has LA over Atlanta somehow, some way in the WNBA finals. I got the Mercury over the Dream for the 3rd time in franchise history. Phoenix wins the WNBA title, and for the 4th straight year, I think the Dream get to the WNBA finals, but again, can't finish the job when it counts the most. So, folks, by the way, folks, real quick, we will let you know that when the playoffs do start, we will be kind of changing up some of the programming, and we'll get to that, folks, right after this break. Coming up next, guys, the Guys with the Petition is back, finally, for the first time in forever. We're talking about our playoff and off-season programming, folks, and I think a lot of people will like our off-season programming for a few reasons why. We'll talk about that and more coming up after this break here. So coming up next here, the Petition Show is up next, covering the playoff and off-season programming. And, of course, after that, folks, we got Sparks Fam coming up after that as well. So we're halfway home here, folks. We'll take a break and come back here on the LA Sparks 365 Network. So please do not go away.